Hello, my name is Ángeles Bueno. I'm a professor at the University Camilo José Cela, and I'm going to present today about critical thinking and how to develop it in our students. These are some of the concepts that we are going to deal with. The definition of concepts regarding critical thinking, the characteristics of a critical thinker, a person who thinks critically, the steps in the critical thinking process, activities that elevate critical thinking, and we are going to see some examples of those activities that stimulate critical thinking. We are going to see some examples, well, some websites of museums or some other websites of that help develop this sort of reasoning. The other aspect essential to develop critical thinking are good questions. A good question is an open question that encourages us to inquire and motivates us to try to go deeper in our learning, in our understanding of certain topics. At the end, we are going to deal with the evaluation and critical thinking, and we are going to see some critical thinking and platforms and how to deal with this sort of fake news that we are having nowadays so often. Definitions of critical thinking. What is it? There are certain cognitive skills related to critical thinking. Some authors, like Frazione, tell us that a person who thinks critically is a person that uses these processes: interpretation, analysis, evaluation, inference, explanation, and self-regulation. Interpretation, that because when they are reading something, they try to go beyond what is written, and they try to understand deeply the meaning of the author. Sometimes when we read literature for certain periods, for instance, in the literature from the Franco's regime, you need to read between lines because the authors wanted to say something, some nuances that they weren't explicit because of the censorship, but you need to read deeply. So that's an ability and a skill that we need to develop in our students. What the authors want to say. The analysis of the fragments of a whole, because those fragments that made up the whole help us to understand it. So it's important to teach them as well to analyze. The evaluation, that's the process that we need to follow step by step. Analyze and evaluate the steps that we are following and if we are doing properly or not. This is related to supra skills such as metacognition, which is the ability to organize ourselves and to control our thinking. Explanation, well, self-regulation is also related to these metacognitive skills. And inference, which is to make new ideas from the ones that we have or that we are reading. A definition by Chance. He says that critical thinking is the ability to analyze facts, generate and organize ideas, defend opinions, make comparisons, make references, evaluate arguments, and resolve problems. So, how can we develop, or what are the characteristics of a person who thinks critically? Well, these persons have intellectual curiosity. So if we know that these people have intellectual curiosity, we as teachers need to encourage the students, our students, to develop that intellectual curiosity. Later on, we are going to see how we can develop or encourage them to develop that intellectual curiosity by means of activities, engage them in the tasks. Intellectual courage, and what's that? Sometimes, for instance, Einstein, or and we have very good examples in history that they had courage to defend their ideas and to argue against many other people that complained, and they said that what they were saying, it was wrong. So that courage to keep on and to make newer arguments and to defend it with new data, and the courage to keep on studying, that's a very powerful ability that these people who think critically have. But we also need to have intellectual humility, because when you have a very good idea and another person has a better one, you have that humility to accept that you may not know everything. And that humility helps you to think in another way, to think in another possibilities, to think about new possibilities that help you understand what you are trying to solve in a new way. But we also need intellectual empathy. And what's that? We need to be able to put in the other person's shoes to understand what she's saying. For instance, imagine that we are reading history and or an article in a journal, and we try to understand what the other person is feeling. Imagine that we're talking about a war, the Second World War, for instance, and if we want to understand deeply what the people from Japan thought and felt during the Second World War, and why there were kamikazes that lost their lives trying to fight for an idea, or what happened to women after the bombing of the nuclear bombs, that nobody wanted to marry them because they may had babies with problems due to the nuclear bomb. So you need to have that empathy to understand the others and to understand the situations in order to get to a new idea of what is right. Bearing in mind different aspects from different sources. Later on, we are going to deal with that, how to use different sources, and we're going to see some examples and people who have dealt with that very well. We need also intellectual integrity. Intellectual integrity to defend our own ideas, and when Copernicus, for instance, one of the examples is when Copernicus says, okay, the world rounds, the earth goes round and round, goes round and round, and it moves. He had intellectual integrity. He nearly died because he was accused of, but he had intellectual integrity and courage to defend his own ideas. Intellectual perseverance to keep on researching on certain topics, Meanwhile, you know that there are quite a lot of scientists that go against you and are saying that you're wrong in many articles. So this is also another good characteristic of people who think critically. And faith in reason and act justly, to have the disposition and be conscious of the necessity to consider improbable outcomes. The process, ethical thinking guide, what are the steps or the process that we as people or as a student need to follow to become critical thinkers? The first is to unite all the information, to gather all the information, to collect it. And with all the information, you need to understand that there may be information that stands on one point and on the other point. But you need to understand those different points. Understand all the concepts. The third, ask where the information came from and try to avoid biases, because this is one of the most important things. It doesn't matter the subject, the science that you are dealing with. Imagine that you're studying history. If you want to understand the history, for instance, of the Primavera Verde, the green spring in the Arab countries, there were many articles in the Western journals, encouraging the uprising of people in those in that green spring. But what happened? What was written in the Eastern journals? What were the people talking about? Was it released, or could you watch news on the TV in those Eastern countries talking about these uprisings? So you need to understand what happened if you want to understand what happened in the Arab countries, you need to understand and to read as well what happened and what was written in those journals. Later on, I'm going to write and put some examples about this. Analyze the sources of information, the credibility. Right now, we see that there are quite a lot of fake news about coronavirus, and they recommend things that you can take, pills, medicines that you can take to avoid COVID-19. But what is the credibility of those sources? You need to read, you need to go to the sources that you know that are good sources. And what are those good sources? Mainly from sources that you know that are, for instance, the Ministry of Health Ministry, the official websites, research departments. So those are credible sources that you can read, because in the website there are quite a lot of information. Some of that information is quite biased. They have a bias because they have interest in something. They want, in the end, they want to sell you something, but you need to read and to understand what are the sources that are credible. Well, the fifth process is to doubt about the conclusions, to think whether it is true or not, or why it may be true or not, and if there is something else that you can study further. To accustom oneself to uncertainty. Sometimes some people try to think in black and white. This is true, or this is the truth, and this is not the truth. and we are right because we have the truth. But the history has told us that there is a line in between, that this is certain till we can demonstrate that it is not. So the truth sometimes is changing a little bit. Well, at least in science, it's always changing, because that's the way we construct, that we build the science, with that uncertainty, questioning the truths that we have discovered so far. Examine the whole, or analyze, evaluate the whole, and generate new or distinct ideas or information. So this is the last step, which is to go beyond and to look for further research, to further aspects that we can inquire. This is an example of how to avoid biased sources. Marie-Thérèse Morest was the director of the school in Geneva, one of the first international school organized in the 50s, in the 1950s. And she was the director, and she was also a teacher of history. And what did he did? He tried to encourage her students to develop an international mindedness that helped them understand what happened in the world. But the way she did was by offering the students different sources and different unbiased sources to look for the information. That way, they could read the pros and cons of a topic, and the students could imagine, organize the ideas, and present what they have understood or what they had read. But this is also related to the idea, to the story that I told you before regarding that history that happened to the Japanese people during the Second World War. We know a lot about the Second World War from the Western point of view. We have watched millions of films, American films, Western films, with the idea of the winners, because the Western were the winners. But what happened? What is the history of the Eastern countries that fought as well that war? One of the stories that, and the students also need to know in order to understand and to get an idea of what happened during that Second World War. And that's the story that I told you about those women. What were the consequences of the bombing, the nuclear bombing? One of the consequences that there were quite a lot of women living in the nearbys of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, that they were single all their lives. Nobody wanted to marry them because they thought that they would have children with problems. So this is another part of the story that we need to know. Examples of activities that stimulate critical thinking. To participate in debates, because in a debate we are always looking for the pros and the cons. We are always looking for arguments and counter-arguments, and this develops critical thinking. We need to join both aspects, the black and the white, so the yin and the yang, to develop an idea, a whole idea of what is happening. But we need to understand both sides. Problem-based learning. This is also a very good strategy to develop critical thinking. And why? Because we begin with a question, with a problem. with something that we need to solve. And in this way, we are trying to we talk about different options to solve the problem, but we also need to analyze those options and which is the best one to solve the problem. And when we have in social sciences, we don't have closed problems as we may have in mathematics, but we have open problems that they don't have a unique solution. There may be quite a lot of solutions. So with these open problems in social sciences, we also develop critical thinking, and we make questions to our students to develop it. Later on, we'll see some of these questions. Case studies. One of the first examples of a case study is the film Dr. House. I think that you remember that where a doctor had a new case of a patient that, well, they didn't know how to solve because they thought it was the illness that this person had. Well, maybe it wasn't, because it didn't work as well as they thought. They gave the patient pills, they gave the patient analysis, blood analysis, things like that. And well, so with this case analysis, with these case studies, is a pretty good way to analyze different points of view to reach the solution. So to explain what is a case study, I like always to put the example of this film, because it's a good way of all the doctors, the practitioners that were in the team of Dr. House team, where they develop this critical thinking. Well, stories, fables that at the end there is a conclusion. So this is also a good way to analyze and to interpret a text. Dramatizations, how to dramatize what the author is trying to convey in that idea. Is your expression doing well what the author wants to convey? What other ways you could dramatize what the author wants to express? Role playing as well, crossword puzzles, questionings, and the art of questioning. And we are going to deal deeper with the art of questioning and essential questions. In the international baccalaureate programs, you know that this is one of the key points, the essential questions that encourage inquiry. Some examples of debates, some examples of things strategies that we have seen before. For examples, examples of themes, children's rights. We could talk with our students about this. What are the children's rights? Pros and cons. Smoking in public places. Is it allowed? Is not? Why we could smoke in public places? Right now, we have seen in the news that they think it's good to smoke in public in open spaces. For instance, in a bar, outside the bar, it's not correct. It's not good to smoke because you can contaminate and you can spread the virus. So what are these? You need to explore the pros and the cons and things, what may happen to other people and what are the effects that this behavior have in other people. Euthanasia, it's another controversial topic. Do we agree or not? Which are our arguments to promote euthanasia or not. What happens in some other countries, in Belgium, in Holland, they are pro-euthanasia and we are not pro-euthanasia. In what cases we could accept it? School uniforms. Do the students should use school uniforms, or do we need to express ourselves with our clothing? Is it correct of express ourselves with our clothing? Student assessment. As teacher, we need to assess the content of what they are saying, the strategy that they are following, and the final argumentation. And what is the teacher's job? To clear the theme, to clear the rule of the debate, and clear time frame, to give each part a time where they can defend and present their arguments. Now the other team, they have 1 minute to present their arguments, and at the end they have the conclusion. The art of questioning, how we should make questions. This teacher does not have the answer to all the questions. And this is a paradigm that we have been changing along the years. Now we are more interested in active methodology that encourages the students to be much more involved in what they are studying and in what they are learning. And the art of questioning, open questions, is something that allows us to motivate our students to go deeper in the learning. The habit of answering a question with another question, that's also very important, because this is the Socratic way of learning. Socrates taught his pupils by questioning and questioning and questioning, and that way he could extract what the other person had inside. But it was a way of teaching him how to reflect. Accustom oneself to allow the student to be the center of the classroom discussion, to be involved in their own learning, to be to promote that the students look for their own information, read their own information, organize it, check whether that information is biased or not, and to look for more information that may get an unbiased solution of the topic that they are dealing with. So here we have some examples of questions. They are in Spanish, but I'm going to translate them. The questions should be provocative. For example, un vídeo musical refleja la cultura de los Estados Unidos. A musical video reflects the culture of the United States. The questions should be open questions. ¿Debió los Estados Unidos usar la bomba atómica? Did the United States should use the atomic bomb? They go to the heart of the discipline, of the subject. How much is the water from the tap drinkable or not? They are desafiantes. For instance, ¿cuándo se justifica que un pueblo se rebele contra su gobierno? When the people is a right of the people to fight against their own government. Should we reveal ourselves against the government? When or not? So I think most of these, all of these questions are, well, very interesting and encourage the students to think. They come up from the real world. For instance, how to build a communal center with materials and resources that are produced by the state. I think that the best way to organize a problem-based the best way to organize problem-based learning, or to organize a problem is just by reading journals. If you read the journals and you take one of the pieces of news that is there, you can elaborate a very good project for the students. For instance, one of the projects that now there are in quite a lot of schools is about the COVID, the coronavirus. The students can understand statistics because they are seeing or watching the normal distribution of the statistics every single day in the news. They can learn about biology. They can learn how viruses work and what are the difference between bacteria and viruses. They can learn a lot, and for them, for the students, it's very interesting to learn that nowadays, because they understand what everyone is talking about during these days, during the confinement. So the best way to organize this sort of learning is, I think, is with the news. Take some news and organize it. Last year, I tried to organize a project with my students. It's in one of the master in leadership and the master in secondary education. And one of the pieces of news that was very controversial, and that was nowadays, well, it happened nowadays in June, July, was that in Asturias, in Cantabria, there were peasants that burned the countryside, and there were quite a lot of incendios. No? So it was a big problem. But why did that people made those fires? Why? Their reasons. They needed the plot, or they needed for another purposes. So that's the way they used to do. So that's a good way to develop this critical thinking. And the questions are short, but are always open. And you can never answer those questions with a yes, no. For instance, the art, words, its price, or the art, words, the money that the people ask for. Well, the essential questions get to the heart of the subject. We have also spoken about this. Cannot be answered with a simple yes, no. Leads to a cross-disciplinary understanding of concepts. If you try to solve some of these questions, you need to look for information in different subjects. So this is very interesting, because this is interdisciplinary or transdisciplinary. These two concepts. And it naturally leads to other questions. these sort of questions open new questions. Here we have some other examples, but these are much more related to one subject. For instance, history. What are the effects that we still have from the colonies? What are the things that we still have? What are how is organized the Commonwealth, for instance? What is the relationship that the Spaniards have with Latin America? So there are quite a lot of things that the way the world is organized can be explained with this organization of the colonies. Still can be explained with the colonies. And it is something that happened, well, in the Middle Ages, when we discovered America, later on with when the English and the French and many other European countries discovered or colonized many other countries all around the world. Will be China the next worldwide potential in language and literature? Why? Sorry, I cannot read it. I'm going to read it in my own PowerPoint. Try. Because I think these questions are very interesting to read all of them. So I'm going to read it here. ¿Por qué un libro se convierte en un clásico? Why a book can become a classic. ¿Por qué sigue siendo popular el Quijote? Why does the Quijote is so popular, and what are the learnings that we can have, we can extract from this book? I remember that when I was very young, when I was a teenager, I photocopied the pages and the recommendations that Don Quixote gave to well, his friend, because when his friend was going to be was going to get the Insula Barataria, and he was going to become the governor of that insula, that island. So the recommendations that Don Quixote gave to Sancho were so nice. Those were a very good explanation how a person should behave in the world. If you follow those recommendations, you are going to be a very nice person. So this make the Quixote so popular. In economy, why do the poverty exist? ¿Cuánto vale mi dinero hoy y cuánto vale en un año? How much my money worth today, and how much will worth within 1 year? What has happened with with the economy during the confinement, that it has gone down quite a lot. And why? About art. How can we make art? And is it worth the money that the artists ask for it, or the galleries ask for it? Sciences. ¿Cómo usar las 3 leyes de Newton para crear un campo de golf en la Luna? How we could use the 3 laws, Newton's laws, to build a yard to play golf in the moon. ¿Cuál es la máxima altura que puede soportar una persona en una montaña rusa? Which is the highest height that a person can stand in a roller coaster? In mathematics, can we predict the increase in the use of an internet website? How can we calculate it? So these are some of the questions that we could ask our students, and with some of these problems, we could organize and we can encourage them to develop critical thinking. So some of the strategies and the theories that we could follow to develop this critical thinking are, for instance, the Bloom's taxonomy, the Stephen Barclay's questions for life, pair method, and the 5 E's. And we are going to deal with that now. The Bloom taxonomy. Bloom organized this taxonomy in the 50s, in the 1950s, but it is so interesting that it helps a lot us to organize teaching. The basic aspects of these intellectual processes, the lower order skills, and these lower order skills are remembering, understanding, and applying. But there are also some higher order skills, which are analyzing, evaluating, and creating. And whenever we ask our students to create something new from something that we have been dealing with, we are encouraging them to create and encouraging them to develop higher order skills and critical thinking. This is the same, but as the one before, the slide before, but organized in a circle. And what we have here in this circle? We have the skills, which are in the center in purple. We have knowledge, evaluation, creating, which is synthesis, analyzing, and applicating. Okay, but what are the things that we can ask the students to do? This is what we see in orange. For instance, if we take knowledge, which is the lowest skill, if we ask them to repeat information, to record, to name, to list, to outline, select information, identified data, authors, we are just dealing with the lowest skill. Things that we may do with them, for instance, tell the name of people, events, definitions of a dictionary. For instance, if we tell the student if we ask questions such as, when was America discovered? We are just dealing with this skill, knowledge. But understand, what are the things that we can ask the students? For instance, or the tasks that we ask the students to do. To explain something, relate information, describe something, paraphrase. To read something and paraphrase it, and you understand the information. Confirm, match, discuss, predict. And what about if we ask the students to analyze? Categorize, investigate, compare, debate, differentiate, examine. We can do, and this is what is in blue, a survey, a syllogism, a model, a conclusion, a graph, an argument, a questionnaire, a report. Whenever we do these tasks, we are analyzing, we are using this skill, which is higher order skill. And what happens is if we ask the students to evaluate, we ask them to solve, to critique, to appraise, assess, and what is the final product that the students may do at the end of this project. They may make an editorial, a conclusion, self-evaluation, a group discussion, a recommendation, a survey. And what happened if we use the to create, to synthesize something, to create, which that's the newest skill that of this Bloom's taxonomy. So combine, design, hypothesize, plan thing, generate something. And what is the final product? We can have a poem, we can have an article, a book, a report, a story, a song. We may have many different final products that all of them are related to this higher order skill, which is create something new. Now we are going to talk about another method, which is PEOR. This stands for predict, explain, observe, reflect, and evaluate. And predict. Now we are going to explain the first step, predict. Okay, to describe to the students what you are going to do. And now we give them something, and they need to predict. For instance, if we give them hot water, medium, temperature, and cold water, and they need to predict what will happen if we give them a food dye. What will happen with the water with different temperatures? They predict. They make them think, and it makes them be engaged on what they are going to deal with. Ask them to predict what will happen. The second step is to explain. The teacher asks the students to explain their predictions made in step 1 and justify the reasoning. This level of metacognition about why they believe the things they do is important, whether or not their predictions are correct or not, and provide indicators to the teacher about gaps in knowledge. So they predict and they reason about those predictions, and they argue between the students. The third step is to observe. So they observe what happens. You carry out the activity, the students watch what the teacher has done, and the students note what has happened and take notes about it. They write it. The fourth step is to reflect. You ask the students to hypothesize about why things happened the way they did. And next, you ask them to construct, to build some sort of a new theory, something beyond their usual experience. Now they have to create something new. And the final step is to evaluate. The teacher should help the steps review their thinking processes and why they developed the hypothesis they did. Think of new actions and review core concepts along the way. Now we are going to see another way of developing this critical thinking, and this is the 5 E's. Here in these websites, we have some links. You can see how in the Miami Museum of Science, they encourage, they use this method to develop critical thinking. And this is after a school training toolkit that it's also very interesting to deal with sciences and to encourage to become critical thinkers. Well, and this is a third link. I hope you get in and see what is there. So if we follow this other, the 5 E's, we are going to first engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. And engage. You gave the student something that motivates the student to inquire. What has happened to this turtle? How is it possible? And what is happening here? Can we make fire just by joining two powders? Two spoons of different powders, and how we can make that explosion. So in this section, in this step, each class should start with an event or a captivating question to catch a student's attention. This awakes the natural curiosity of a child about the concepts that will be explored. This also helps make links between past knowledge and the new ideas that are the focus of the class. The second stage is explore. Students do an activity that allows them to explore the concept or the skills in mind. They tackle the questions, the quick key questions, and they tackle the problem. This stage allows the students to come to an understanding of what they don't know yet, and about their own thinking process to ask questions of one another. For instance, in this bowl, when the students touch this bowl, it has energy, negative energy, and what happens is that your hair becomes like this. And so just by playing with this, the students think, what is happening? What there may be inside, on how we can make static electricity just by rubbing. For instance, a pencil make a static electricity. So the students explore why it happens, and they get to a newer understanding. And only after the students have explored and have got to new ideas, and they have thought about it, the teacher explain what the students must have explored before. So only after the students have explained their own thinking should the professor actually explain or be the source for answers. The teacher should help the students develop the knowledge and use the vocabulary related to the core concepts as well. The next step is to elaborate. This stage provides students with a chance to deepen their knowledge about concepts and to get further explanations where needed. These can also include additional activities in which the student puts the concepts into practice. This stage should include a discussion and comparison of different students' understandings about their own thinking processes. And the final stage is to evaluate, when the students can continue refining their understanding, or they can evaluate their own knowledge and follow a metacognitive process to understand whether they have followed a good path or not, or to analyze the process that they have followed. For instance, we have seen this slide before, and I explained who this lady was. The director of the Geneva International School, the first international school. So just by offering the students different points of view, you can read a newer understanding. And this is a way to become well informed using different sources. And now I would like to deal with reliable news platforms. Now we know that we have fake news that interfere in our understanding, and they have information which is not good information. So the way to prevent this fake news and fake information is by going to good sources. In science, we have some good sources. For instance, we have databases or articles which are mainly Web of Science and Scopus. These two sources are sources where scientists publish good articles, really good articles. And why are good articles? Because they have had a peer evaluation. That's it. Before publishing an article, two scientists of the same area, of the same subject, have analyzed that article, and they have said that it is a good article because they have analyzed very good sources, because they conclude the method, the scientific methods that they have followed it properly. The analysis of the data, of the numbers or of the words, if it is a qualitative analysis, it has been properly done. Therefore, the conclusions are naturally developed. So those are the main sources that as a student you could use, or if you are in the university, because this is a book published by Alan November, Empowering Students with Technology. And in this book, he demonstrates the ways in which technology can expand students' learning experiences and strengthen critical thinking. This book energizes classroom with innovative ideas to spark learners' interest, and he demonstrates what technology is already accomplishing in classrooms. I like a lot this book because he explains how we can look for good sources to look for unbiased information. He follows the same steps as Marie-Thérèse Moret followed when teaching history, but Alan November using the same process but using technology. For instance, in the examples that I gave to you regarding the Green Spring in the Arab countries, La Primavera Verde, the uprisings that happened those some years ago in the Arab countries, that there were demonstrations in the street and people went out to demonstrate against the power, the established power. So what were the news that we read in the Western countries, and what were the news that came up in the Eastern journals? So just by looking to the end information, to the end So this is, for instance, if we, in every direction or link, in every link, we can see that at the end there is an ending. ES is for Spain, US for United States, and there are some other endings for any other country. So if you look for the information and put at the end that ending, you look for that information just in that country. So it's easier to look for information, to look for articles from those Eastern countries and to read what they thought about those uprisings, and not only to have the Western point of view. So if you want to go deeper, I would encourage you to read this author, Alan November, because he explains very well how we could use these different sources as teachers to allow the students to get an unbiased understanding of the topics that they want to deal with. Here we have, this is the same as Bloom's taxonomy, the taxonomy that I explained before, and how to develop this critical thinking. And here you have many different tools, technology tools that you could use to develop these critical thinking skills. These are the references that I have used to organize this presentation. I hope you have enjoyed, and if you want to ask me questions, you can write me to my email address, which is bueno@ucjc.edu. Thanks. Bye-bye.